Hello everybody and welcome back to Dice Check. I am Magikarp also known as Matt, and today we are going to be going over the Grey Knights and how to start playing Grey Knights. Now the reason why I wanted to do these types of videos is so then we can help people start their army. We're going to be going over stuff like the lore of the army, their different play styles, their key units, what makes them special, cool combos you can do, some lists that you can start out with, hobbying tips, painting tips, basically just a bunch of stuff to help you get started when it comes to 40k, since there's so much information. And since Grey Knights just got their new 9th edition codex, I thought that, you know what, they'd be a good jumping off point for this particular series. Now, I want to do this on all kinds of different armies, so if you have an army that you want to learn how to play 40k with, then please type it out in the comment section and I will go over them eventually. There's a lot and there's so much to cover. So yeah, we're just gonna, there's so much fucking information in this stupid head of mine. So if you're a new player and you want to learn how to get into Grey Knights, if you want to learn how to play Grey Knights, you want to start playing Grey Knights, or you know their new 9th edition codex came out, you don't know how to break it down or anything like that, this is the video for you. I'm going to give you guys all kinds of different tips. And yeah, without further ado, let's do it. This is starting 40k Grey Knights. Now, the Grey Knights are a secret and mysterious 666th chapter of Astartes made to kill demons of the warp and anyone who pledges their allegiance to the gods of chaos. They lived on Titan, which is a moon revolving Saturn, and that's where Malcador store 8 Astartes that were the most dedicated to the Imperium and aware of the threat from the warp. During the Horus Heresy, Titan was ripped from reality and brought into the timeless realm of the warp, where it sat there for years in regular space-time, but unknown how long they spent in the timeless space of the warp before eventually reappearing during the second founding. They were engineered using the gene seed directly from the Emperor, and so every Grey Knight is a potent psyker and lives in secrecy, mind-wiping anyone who witnesses them using arcana to destroy chaos. Another cool fact is that they can like break steel with their bare fists, which is kind of cool. They just want to kill chaos. That's basically their whole thing. That's why a lot of their stuff is like demon hammers, something demon slayer bullshit, all that stuff. That's the basic lore. If you want to know more about it, then go ahead and read the rest of the 9th edition codex. There's also a bunch of books. If you want to read up on some more lore about Grey Knights, I recommend the Grey Knights Omnibus, which is a trilogy of short stories based around Justicar Alaric, the Emperor's Gift going over the First Armageddon War, and Sons of Titan following the story of a squad of Grey Knights fighting against Nurgle. We're going to be talking about their playstyle next. Unlike other Imperium armies, there's a lot of psychic powers, just lots of brain stuff that you're going to be doing throughout the game. If you enjoy the psychic phase, you're going to love it when you're playing Grey Knights, because everybody is a psyker. Your psychic phase, you're going to be saying things like, all right, they're going to use Purifying Ritual, this unit's going to use Hammerhand, this unit's going to use Symphonic Strike, this guy's going to use Gate of Infinity. It sounds pretty badass, and it's a lot of fun just rolling a bunch of dice during the psychic phase. Army is a little bit cagey. You want to hold back and wait for your time to strike when it comes to Grey Knights. Grey Knights, they're not very durable. They can be durable, just like a little bit, but they're not incredibly durable as something like Dark Angels. And because you're not that durable, that means that you can't just like go up the board and just sit on an objective. So what you need to do is play a little bit more cagey, wait for your enemy to come to you, and then that's when you come out and do your powerful strikes. You want to play for that mid board as Grey Knights, because if you don't and you just go ooga booga and you just push everything up the board, a lot of your stuff is going to die because you're not that fast. You are kind of fast, but because you're not that fast, you want to wait for your opponent to come to you instead, so then you can play against them with a good counterpunch. When you're playing Grey Knights, you have to adhere to this rule called Brotherhood Command, where you can only have one Grandmaster and one Brotherhood Captain per detachment. Each Grandmaster must be from a different Brotherhood, and each Brother Captain must be from a different Brotherhood as well. This will probably literally never come up for you when you're making your army list, because really this only functions because if you're running something like Grandmaster Voldus, maybe, and then a Brother Captain. It's really not going to come up a lot. The one thing that we should be talking about, though, is called the Aegis. 8th edition, you had something like a +1 to cast. That's no longer the case anymore. Instead, if a model receives a mortal wound, you roll a dice, and on a 5-up, the wound isn't lost. So basically, you just get a 5-up feel no pain throughout your entire army, even on your rhinos and on your vehicles, your land raiders, your dreadnoughts, even like your flyers, they all get a 5-up feel no pain against mortal wounds. It's actually pretty good considering that a lot of stuff deals mortal wounds nowadays. I mean, we're talking about Twin Volkite, Contemptor Dreadnoughts. We're talking about Admech, Drakari, Sisters. There's so much mortal wounds out there that are being spat out at people. You know, the 5-up feel no pain against mortal wounds is actually pretty good. All of your psychers get +1 to their Deny the Witch tests. This fucking sucks. +1 to your Deny the Witch test. It works, I guess, well against other psychic armies. Honestly, I would just want a +1 to psychic test because some of our psychic powers are kind of unreliable to cast. There are ways to get around that. It's just, you know, add 1 to your Deny the Witch test. Brotherhoods are like your sub-factions when it comes to Grey Knights. You know, you got things like your High Fleets for Tyranids, you have your different clan cultures for Orcs, you have your Sisters with whatever the fuck they're called. But what Brotherhoods also give you is that they give you a psychic power, they give you a stratagem, and they give you a warlord trait. And everybody that's in that Brotherhood also has access to that psychic power. They all know that psychic power, and every psyker knows smite. So you actually know 2 or 3 powers for every single unit in your army, which is pretty cool. It gives you so much flexibility when you're playing this army. Then when you are starting off Grey Knights, these are the Brotherhoods that you should start out with. So then that way you can learn how the army really functions. And then from there, you can go ahead and go into things like Ward Makers, Blades of Victory, Preservers. There's a lots of really, really cool Brotherhood abilities that are out there. First one is going to be Rapiers. Rapiers is so good because it meshes with the army so well. The psychic power that every Brotherhood or every unit is going to know in this one is Symphonic Strike, which has a warp charge of 6 where you get +1 attack. A lot of stuff in your army, like your troops and your infantry, has base 3 attacks. You don't get Shock Assault, you just have it built are baked into your profile. So you just get flat 3 attacks and then 4 attacks for your Justicar. And then if you cast the psychic power, you get +1 attack. So instead of having a 5-man squad doing 16 attacks, you're actually doing 21 attacks when Symphonic Strike is active for this army. Really, really good, especially when you consider all the different buffs that you can give these units with the amount of attacks that they have. It is crazy how efficient that they are. And speaking of efficient, we're going to talk about the stratagem Deadly Efficacy. Exploding 6s to hit. That means that if you have Symphonic Strike, 21 attacks, exploding 6s, that means that you're probably on average going to be getting extra attacks in the sense of like going over the 21 attacks that you originally did. So you're probably going to get 23 attacks or 24 attacks or 24 hits. The Warlord trait is Inescapable Wrath, which gives your Warlord advance and charge. This Warlord trait isn't really used that much just because a lot of your weapons are heavy. And so you don't want to advance and then not be able to shoot that weapon, which again, it fucking sucks. But if you want to use an Inescapable Wrath, it's probably good on something like a Brotherhood Captain or a Brotherhood Champion or something like that. Next up, we have Prescient. This one is one of my favorite ones. The psychic power is called Fatal Precognition. This one has a warp charge value of 5. When the enemy unit moves, advances, charges, and falls back on a 4 to 5, deal D3 mortal wounds, and on a 6, deal 3 mortal wounds. This psychic power, it sounds good, but it's probably better if you just use Smite instead. This also has a 12-inch range, so not that great. You're basically saying, you won't charge me, bitch. I'll bet you won't. The reason why I love this Brotherhood so much is literally because of the stratagem Foresight. 1 CP, you get to reroll hit rolls of 1 and wound rolls of 1 for a unit. This works. You can activate this in both the shooting phase and you can activate this inside of your fight phase as well. Things like your Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knights that hit on 2s and probably are going to be wounding on 2s. You can pop this stratagem and you get to reroll your hit rolls of 1 and wound rolls of 1. It's like, why even roll dice in the first place? points. You can also use this on things like interceptors, since interceptors don't have access to a lot of reroll stuff. Besides that, you have a warlord trait called Divination, which has a warp charge value of 6, which is a psychic action. And if you complete it, you get +1 command points. It's okay. It really depends on if you want to front load your army with an extra command point, or if you want to wait throughout the game in order to gain extra command points. So you're looking at maybe like on average 3 command points extra for a game, which is decent enough because it could the character can die. He could fail the psychic action, all that stuff. So if it's raining outside, don't take it. If it's not raining outside, take it. Who cares? Sword bearers. This one has a psychic power called Empiric Lodestone. It has a warp charge value of 7, and it gives +1 to wound for vehicles. It has a 12-inch range. Walk up to something, you say, this one, I want all of my vehicles to get +1 to wound. Pop this power. If it goes off, then every vehicle that shoots at that unit gets it with +1 to wound. Pretty good. Warp charge value of 7 makes it a little bit harder to cast. It's not that reliable. If it was like warp charge 6, I'd be happier with it. It's not as consistent as something like Symphonic Strike. It's even not as consistent as Fatal Precognition. This just might not go off, and then if it doesn't go off, then your entire plan is screwed. You don't get that +1 to wound for your vehicles. The Stratagem is Marked for Death. This one is 2 command points, spend 2 CP. You get +1 to hit when you shoot at it for any ranged weapon from any unit. So the combo would just be drop down a unit, Mark for Death something, Empiric Lodestone it, so you get the +1 to hit and you get the +1 to wound. Like on paper, if this goes off, it's pretty brutal. You can basically wipe an entire unit off of just this alone. You can wipe multiple units off of this alone. It makes you extremely efficient, but it's just that warp charge of 7 that's kind of a problem that I'm not a big fan of. And then also 2 command points is pretty hefty for Grey Knights that are going to be spending a lot of command points throughout the game. You're going to be spending stuff like Empiric Declamation that costs 2 CP. If you want to use Transhuman, that's 2 CP. Using 3 dice for Psychic Power is 1 CP. There's so much command points that you're going to be spending that 2 command points is kind of a tall order. Also, you got a Warlord trait, Rites of Protection, warp charge value of 5, which is a psychic action. You can take a vehicle that's within 12 inches of this Warlord and give it a 4-up invuln. This Warlord trait's pretty good, especially if you're taking something like a Rhino. You can take that Rhino and give it a 4-up invuln, which is pretty funny. They also get smoke screen, so you can have a Rhino that's -1 to hit and then also has a 4-up invuln. You can also take Dreadnoughts as well inside of this Brotherhood, which I like to do, because then you can give both Dreadnoughts a 4-up invuln. Let's head on over to our key stratagems. These are the stratagems that you're going to be using almost every single turn. So the first one that we're going to talk about is Psychic Channeling. This is 1 command point. Select a Psyker unit and roll 3d6 when making psychic tests, dropping the lowest number until the end of the phase. If you use this on something like a Librarian that can cast 2 powers, that means that both those powers, you can roll 3d6 for both of them. And so if they're doing something like Dominus powers that are warp charge 7 or anything like that, it makes it a lot more reliable. On top of that, we have Powerful Adept. This is 1 command point, add 6 inches to all psychic powers a unit casts until the end of the phase. What you will notice inside of Grey Knights is that a lot of their psychic powers are 12 inches. Vortex of Doom, 12 inches. Fatal Precognition is 12 inches. There's other ones that are 12 inches. Purifying Flame, 9 inches. You know, all of these psychic powers aren't exactly 18 inches, so using Powerful Adept to get you that extra length that you need in order to get a certain debuff onto a unit is going to be great. A Psychic Onslaught, this is 1 command point in the shooting phase. Improve the strength and armor penetration of a unit's psi weapons by 1 until the end of the phase. Pretty good on your Nemesis Dreadknights. Nemesis Dreadknights have a heavy psi cannon that they have access to, which is strength 8, -2 AP, 2 damage. You pop this on them, all of a sudden it is strength 9, -3, 2 damage. That's pretty good. It also helps out regular psi cannons as well. Regular psi cannons are AP 1. This bumps it up to AP 2 and makes it strength 8 because regular psi cannons are strength 7. Empiric Declamation, this one costs 2 command points. This thing is, it's so good. So at the start of any phase, select a priest that has not yet recited a litany since the start of your command phase, and select a litany that becomes automatically inspiring. So what you can do is you can take a chaplain. And what you can do is you can gate him to another side of the board or push him somewhere where he really needs to be in order to get a litany off. You spend the 2 command points on like your shooting phase or in your fight phase, in your charge phase. No matter what, it's whatever phase that you want at the start of it, you can just pop this and get it and have it automatically pass for 2 command points. Next up, we got Mental Focus. This one lets a psyker unit attempt to manifest 1 additional psychic power. So if you're using something like a librarian, you want to go for a mortal wound bomb, you're going to spend this for 1 extra command point. So then that way he can cast Smite, Vortex of Doom, and also Purifying Flame. Another really great stratagem is Fight on the Move. This costs 1 command point. A teleporter unit can still shoot and charge during a turn in which it fell back. This is really good. Fallback shoot and charge is so strong. I mean, like Tyranids, they run Kraken because of fallback and charge. Harlequins, fallback and charge. So Fight on the Move, very, very good. You can use this on your interceptors that move 12 inches. So when they fall back, they can move actually 12 inches. So you can move 12 inches onto an objective or closer to another unit that you want to fight and then charge that instead. Next up, we got Teleportation Shunt. This one I'm a little bit iffy on. It costs 2 command points. You select a teleporter unit on the battlefield, remove it from the battlefield, and set them up anywhere outside of 9 inches of any enemy models. It's good, but it's also very expensive to do this. You can also only do this on 1 unit for the battle round or for the entire game. So every unit can only be affected by this once. If you're going up against something that has a lot of Deny the Witch tests and you don't want to take the chance on Gate of Infinity because you're inside of Deny the Witch range, then I can see Teleportation Shunt being used more often. But for 2 command points, when you have all these other stratagems that you really want to use, this one makes it kind of expensive. I think the next big thing that we should talk about are our tides because it's so important to this army. So I'm going to rank them from the best to worst. We got Tide of Shadows. This one, if you're shot from 12 inches away, you receive light cover, so you get +1 to your save. If you already receive light cover and are fully on terrain, you receive -1 to hit as well. This makes it so then that way your regular chaff, like your troops, your strike squads, even your terminators, your interceptors, hell, even your vehicles receive light cover. Because they can't receive light cover from area of terrain, but they can receive light cover from Tide of Shadows. That's pretty strong. Tides of Shadows, you're always going to want to start off on this. There's another tide that I think that you can start off with, but Tide of Shadows, you always want to start off at least inside of this tide before moving over to another tide by using your psychic power warp shaping. The next big one that's really good is Tide of Convergence. This one, oh my god, it's so strong because you can compare this up with Words of Power, but Tide of Convergence is really good. Add 6 inches to all psi weapons and unmodified wound rolls of 6s from your nemesis weapons. Deal a mortal wound in addition. Anything that has PSI in it, all of a sudden get a 30-inch range instead of just 24 inches of range, which is very good. 30-inch range when the map is like 44 inches wide and then 60 inches long. That's a lot of area that you can cover. And then on top of that, when you go into melee combat, you can also deal mortal wounds, and that's going to be Grey Knight's Mortal Wound Engine. You know, your psychic phase, you're going to be dealing some mortal wounds, and in your fight phase, you're going to be dealing a lot of mortal wounds because of Tide of Convergence. Next one after that, we have Tide of Escalation. This one lets you cast your Brotherhood powers like a smite. So every single army, or every single unit in your army that is in a specific Brotherhood, each one of them knows their Brotherhood powers, so every single one of them can cast it like it's smite. So if you want to use Fatal Precognition on multiple units, then you can be in Tide of Escalation and then have each one of them cast it onto separate units. I feel like that you can start off in it in certain matchups where you feel like that you're going to get counterpunched really hard if you push onto an objective if you get first turn. Then you can start off in Tide of Escalation and then switch over to Tide of Shadows. But besides that, I don't really see a point of Tide of Escalation. I don't think it's that great. Next up, we have Tide of Celerity. This one makes your advance and charge rolls of 1 and 2 treated as 3. This one's okay. There's a lot of people that say that, you know, you can run something like First to the Fray where you get +1 to your charge rolls, and then you use Tide of Celerity and you have like a pretty decent chance with a reroll in order to get in on that charge. You're kind of just banking on your Tide of Celerity that has a chance of failure, which never feels good. And then on top of that, you're not getting stuff like your Tide of Convergence buffs. You're not getting your Tides of Shadow buffs for everything else that didn't charge. So I think that's okay. It's like, it's up to you if you want to be aggressive with it. I want to mitigate my chances as much as possible. And with Tide of Celerity, it doesn't mitigate it enough for me to want to ever use it. And then we have Tide of Banishment, which is just your fluffy against demons. You take this tide because you subtract 2 from leadership for demons, which is pretty good when you're going up against things like demonettes, but like even then you are going to kill a bunch of them anyways, and they were going to fail morale regardless. And then you get to reroll hit and wound rolls of 1 against a demon unit. So you get Foresight for free, basically. All right, let's talk about our different psychic powers. Now, we have access to 2 separate disciplines. You got Dominus and Sanctic. First up, let's talk about some of our most strongest Dominus powers. I'm not going to put Warp Shaping in here because Warp Shaping is an auto take. Warp Shaping, it manifests on a 4. That one lets you change your tide. You want to take it at least 1 unit, so then that way you can immediately switch to a different tide if you need to. Dominus disciplines, a lot of the problems with this discipline is that a lot of them have a high warp charge value. Gate of Infinity has a warp charge value of 7, which lets you TP a unit 9 inches away from an enemy model. It's not a reliable number when it comes to your psychic phase, and especially on something that's as pivotal and as good as Gate of Infinity. It's like, it kind of sucks that you don't get +1 to your cast because warp charge 7 is very, very high. You're gonna want to spend that CP for rolling 3d6 dice when you're using it. Empiric Amplification, another warp charge 7. This one's really good. Psi and Nemesis weapons deal +1 damage. Again, it's also warp charge 7, which is so disheartening. It's such a good psychic power. If it goes off, amazing. You're gonna kill whatever this puts, goes onto. So Empiric Amplification, great. Gate of Infinity, great. And then we've got Sanctuary. This one is warp charge 6. This psychic power, it's not that great comparatively. If you think about it, if you're inside of your Tide of Shadows, a 4-up invuln really isn't that much. Like, you already get +1 to your armor save, so you have a 2-up save. Anything that targets you, it has to either ignore the benefits of cover, so things like Hive Guard are actually really, really good against Grey Knights because they ignore Tide of Shadows. -1, -2 weapons are going to be wounding you on 4s anyway. And then if it's a -3 weapon, we're looking at stuff like Cognis las guns or las cannons. Fucking Cognis las guns. Can you imagine? You know, you're looking at stuff like Cognis las cannons and Dark Lances basically shooting at you. And that's like, if they're shooting at you with those weapons, you've already basically won because you have your other Nemesis Dread Knights out there doing their own thing. They want to shoot at that with those weapons instead. Having to shoot a 2-wound unit that's T4 with those weapons is so inefficient. So you're already winning in that regard anyway. So giving them a 4-up invuln really isn't that big of a deal. And then we have Vortex of Doom, another warp charge 7 cast. This one, if it's successful, you deal 2d3 mortal wounds to the closest unit within 12 inches and 1 mortal wound to every unit that's 3 inches within that unit. You want to use this on things like your librarians or even on Caldor Drago. You want to stack your warp charge 7s onto a single unit just because that way you save your CP when it comes to something like using psychic channeling, where you get to roll 3d6 for every single test that you have. And if every single test that you have is warp charge 7, like the hardest ones are on that, and then you have to roll your 3d6 dice for that, that makes it a lot more reliable than just going off of using 2 and then CP rerolling, hopefully, if it doesn't go off. So you need to be able to keep that in consideration when you're building your army list. I recommend that you use stuff like Gate of Infinity, Empiric Amplification, and Vortex of Doom on something like Caldor Drago that can know all 3 of those powers, and then just use 3d6 dice to roll all of them anyways, and then you can have Sanctuary on something else. Next up, we have the Sanctic Discipline. The Sanctic Discipline is different because you can cast these powers multiple times as long as you're casting it onto different units. What the fuck is wrong with me? Your Sanctic Discipline, the best ones are going to be Hammerhand. This one has a warp charge value of 5. You get to re-roll your wound rolls in melee, which is disgusting. All of your strikes know this power naturally, and so when you use Hammerhand and then you pair that up with something like Rapiers, then you're getting 21 attacks. Caldor Drago can give you rerolls, and then when you're wounding, you can reroll your wound roll, and you're usually wounding stuff on 3s and 2s because you're strength 6 weapons with halberds with AP 2 damage. Amazing. Hammerhand is so good. Purifying Flame is also incredibly good. Warp charge value of 5. These have low warp charge values, which makes casting them incredibly good. An enemy unit within 9 inches gets dealt 3 mortal wounds, and on a result of 11 plus, they get dealt D3 plus 3 mortal wounds. This comes built in with your purifiers, and purifiers also get +1 to their cast when they're using Purifying Flame. You actually just need a 4 in order for this to go off, and then you would need a 5 if you were to cast it again. It has a range of 9 inches, but we already talked about the stratagem. I think it was it Mental Focus? Powerful Adept, I think one of those. It can give you a 6-inch range to it, so it actually has a 15-inch range. Next up, we have Armored Resilience. This one has a warp charge value of 6 and gives you +1 to your armor save. It's so good. If only other units can take it besides paladins. Pretty good. You can stack this with something like Tides of Shadows, so if you have a 2-up save, you use Armored Resilience to get +1 to that, and then you're in light cover as well, so you get a 0-up save. I know that you can't save on a 1 because a 1 automatically fails no matter what. If it is AP1 or AP2 and you have a 0-up save and you're being shot at an AP1 or AP2 weapon, then you're still saving on 2s instead of saving on 3s or 4s. Let's head on over to our key units. There's so many good units in here. I'm going to try to blow through them as fast as possible. Why am I horny? Grandmaster and Nemesis Dread Knight. This is an HQ unit. He is so good because he deals reliable damage. He hits on 2s. You can give him a relic called the Sigil of Exigence that lets him TP away when targeted for shooting. Upgrade him to also have a 3-up invuln for a turn. He only costs 235 points. You're going to give him a heavy side cannon. That's 6 shots of strength 8 AP 2 damage hitting on 2s. And then you can also give him a Gatling cannon, or this Gatling silencer, or whatever it's called. That's 12 shots, strength 5, hitting on 2s, AP 1 damage. And then you can use something like Empiric Amplification with him in order to give all of those damage, or give everything +1 damage as well. Also give him a Nemesis Greatsword. Nemesis Greatsword is so good on any of your Dread Knights. So he's just so versatile, especially since he's hitting on 2s. Not only that, but he knows 2 Dominus spells and can cast 1. So he's great for putting stuff like Vortex of Doom or Empiric Amplification onto him, just because you can do stuff like drop him in, use Vortex, spend a CP to cast another power, and then use Empiric Amplification. Sigil of Exigence by itself, making it so then you're playing mind games with your opponent. This is a T6 model with 13 wounds, with a 4-up invuln, 3-up invuln for a single turn. That means that like people really don't want to shoot at it because it's a waste of shots. And then even if they do shoot at it, you can just move it away and then put it behind cover, because he benefits from obscuring terrain, or you could just put it way in the far back and then just shunt him up the board later on, or Gate of Infinity him. Caldor Drago. Okay, Caldor Drago is just good because he's just Caldor Drago. He gets Chapter Master rerolls, and this guy is fucking a menace when it comes to melee combat. He hits like a truck. You can see right here, I put hits like a fucking truck. His weapon is +4, -4, 3 damage, and it's also considered a nemesis weapon. So if you use Empiric Amplification, then it's also damage 4. So he hits like a truck. He gets like 6 attacks, hitting on 2s. You're going to be wounding on either 2s or 3s. So super good. He also gives off reroll hit rolls of 1. I forgot to say also that the Nemesis Dread Knight, the Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knight, gives off reroll hit rolls of 1 to core units. He's not core, but regular Nemesis Dread Knights are core, so good for him. Also, he has a 3-up invuln naturally. He just has a 3-up invuln. He is just an absolute monster. He knows 3 Dominus powers, can cast 2. The second powers that I think that you should go with are either Sanctuary, Warp Shaping, and Gate of Infinity, or Gate of Infinity, Empiric Amplification, and Vortex of Doom if you want to be more aggressive with him. Next up, we have the Brotherhood Chaplain. This guy is an absolute menace. He can auto pass his litany in any phase for 2 command points. It's a little bit expensive, but you really want it because of Words of Power. This litany is so good. You get exploding 6s to wound, and it deals a mortal wound in addition to any other damage when you're inside of the Tides of Convergence. It's so good. Words of Power is so strong. With Words of Power and stuff like Hammer Hand, it is not uncommon to see a strike squad with Hammer Hand and Words of Power onto them deal like 13 mortal wounds and 24 saves. If you roll hot, I've had rolls where I dealt 23 mortal wounds and had them take 30 saves at strength 6, AP 2 damage. Because of Words of Power, your melee combat is just so strong. On top of that, he also knows 1 Dominus power and can cast 1. I feel like that if you're gonna bring a Brotherhood Chaplain, Empiric Amplification is really good just because he's gonna be close to the action anyway, since he wants to use his Words of Power litany very often. And then you also have Warp Shaping as an option, just so then he could be like an action monkey. And then if he's not casting Warp Shaping, then instead you can either be using Smite or your Brotherhood power. Interceptors, they move 12 inches, but they basically have Flip Belt, so they can, since they're infantry, they can breach through stuff. And then on top of that, they don't have to measure vertical distances, so if they're going over stuff that's not obscuring like crates, they don't have to measure over it. They just go straight through it. It's kind of like Flip Belt. On top of that, they can move over models as well, which is really nice. So these guys are super speedy boys. They get 16 attacks. If they're inside of a Rapier's attachment, Symphonic Strike gives them +1 attacks, +1 attack for 21 attacks in total. They hit on 3s. They're also a teleporter unit, which means that they can fall back, shoot, and charge for 1 CP. Then I typed in Halberds, strength 6, AP 2 because just Halberds are so fucking good. It's so strong. They know Ethereal Castigation for Fire and Fade, which means that they can move 12 inches, cast this psychic power, and then shoot, and then have them move again another 12 inches. So they can actually get 24 inches of movement. Honestly, Ethereal Castigation isn't that great. If you can use something like Cybele Ammunition, where you can get your Storm Bolters to get AP 1 and then also auto wounds on 6s, if you can use that during your psychic phase as well, then I would say that your Ethereal Castigation is a lot better. But instead, just use your interceptors in order to get up to the midfield board. Do stuff like Purifying Ritual, get them on there to get Stranglehold, have them move up so then you can do something like Retrieve Octaria's data or get engaged on all fronts. There's so much stuff that you can do with interceptors where I feel like Ethereal Castigation, you don't really need it. Nemesis Dread Knights, they all have 4 wounds. They're T6, 13 wounds. I'm not going to talk about them too much. You get a teleporter. It's basically the same. It's like a discount Grandmaster Nemesis Dreadnought. And I think that the biggest thing with them is that they can get rerolls to their hit roll with Drago because they are core. You can also bring a Tech Marine to give them +1 to hit. They know Hammer Hand. They can cast 1 power. Honestly, with Hammer Hand, you don't really need it with these Dread Knights unless you know that you're going to get into melee combat. If you're not going to get into melee combat, don't cast Hammer Hand. Just use them as a smite. Or you can use them to do psychic actions as well, like Purifying Ritual. Strike squads, they all know Hammer Hand. They're amazing for Words of Power and Rapier's Symphonic Strike to get 21 attacks. Caldor Drago gives them reroll hit rolls, and then Hammerhand gives them reroll wound rolls. They are extremely efficient for only 110 points. They will nuke literally almost anything in close combat with their buffs. The only thing that holds them back is that they have a 6-inch move, so they won't get into combat until around turns 2 and 3. So they are good, but interceptors are just a little bit more reliable because of how fast they can move. And because they can move so fast, you know, you can get around the board more quickly, get more board control, whereas strike squads have to kind of just foot slog across the board, even with a 6-inch move, and you're advancing them. Secondaries, you have access to 3 different secondaries. You got Teleport Assault. We're not going to talk about the Demon one because it's just a fluffy one. But Teleport Assault, you score 3 if you killed a unit with a unit that was set up using Teleport Strike, Gate of Infinity, or Teleportation Shunt. Honestly, I think that this secondary is kind of garbage because you have to spend so much resources in order to get it. I feel like that a Purifying Ritual, which is a broken secondary is incredibly better. But yeah, Purifying Ritual has a warp charge value of 5. It's a psychic action. As long as you're within 3 inches of an objective, you can attempt to cast it, receive 1 point if you do it on 1 objective, 2 points for 2 objectives, 4 points for 3, and 6 points for 4. And what's great is that any amount of units that's a psyker can cast it. Any type of unit can cast it as long as they're a psyker. So things like your Dread Knights can use it. Your Dreadnoughts can cast it. Your characters can cast it. Anybody can cast it. The warp charge value never increases, so it's always on a warp charge of 5, and you don't have to control the objective just to be within 3 inches. Only time that you wouldn't take Purifying Ritual is literally if you're up against something like Sisters of Battle or Thousand Suns, where they have a bunch of denied the witch tests. Besides that, this is a great secondary. You're going to want to take it almost all the time because it is absolutely broken. When people say that it's bad because of 4 objective maps, you can still get on 3 objectives and still get 4 points. So it's still good. These are the only ones that are somewhat difficult if you're a pussy. Let's talk about the secondaries you want to build your list around. You want to take Stranglehold because you have enough fast moving, firepower, and melee to easily score it. You have your interceptors that move 12. You can use Gate of Infinity to get onto another objective if you really need to. You have so much fast moving stuff that you can get Stranglehold really, really easily and still play very cagey. Purifying Ritual, this is an easy 15 points. You should take it all the time. Retrieve Octarius Data, you have enough fast-moving units with your Interceptors. You can also use Action Monkeys with your Servitors to use to get Rod off of. Raise the Banners High is also pretty good if you take Servitors, so you can easily rack up points and banners. To the last, if you're bringing a Paladin Bomb, and the next one would be a Mission Secondary if it's really good. You don't want to take Engage on all fronts all the time, just because even though you're fast, it puts you out of position. Remember that when you're playing Grey Knights, you want to be very cagey. You are an elite army, so running Engage on all fronts, you need to be a little bit more aggressive, and you don't have a lot of chaff in order to make up for those points, to get, throwaway units to get onto different table quarters. So Stranglehold, I feel like, is better. Purifying Ritual, incredibly good. And then you just choose between Banners, Rod, or your Mission Secondary. Here are some template lists. These aren't end-all, be-all, but they're lists to help you get started with room to flex them around to fit how you want to play. So first, we got a list running 2 Patrol Detachment, 1 with Rapiers and 1 with Prescient. We have a Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knight running 2 Warlord traits with a Stratagem, Exemplar of the Silver Host, to give a non-named character unit an additional Warlord trait. So he's got the Hammer of Righteousness, so when he's charged, is charged, or performs a heroic intervention, he gets +1 to his wounds. And since he's bringing a Nemesis Greatsword that has 2 profiles of either Strength 12 or Strength 6, you're going to be wounding on 2s all the time, and you get access to Foresight and Prescient to give him reroll hit rolls and wound rolls of 1. He also has the Gatling Silencer and Heavy Side Cannon. All of the psychic powers for any of these units are all interchangeable to what you feel most comfortable with your playstyle as well. Then we're filling out troops with a Strike Squad, putting in Servitors for Action Monkeys, and 2 Nemesis Dread Knights so they can also get access to Foresight if you need it, as well as an additional squad of Interceptors. For Rapiers, we've got your Brotherhood Chaplain running Unyielding Anvil, which is a Warlord trait, to give off an aura of OBSEC, as well as Caldor Drago. And then we have another Strike Squad and 2 Purifier Squads just because of Purifying Flame. Since they get +1 to their cast, it makes them great units to drop on someone, spend 1 CP to increase its range by 6 inches, and deal 3 flat mortal wounds to something, or you can just push them up the board. And finally, we've got 2 10-mans of Interceptors to combat squad into 4 squads of them. You can also group the Purifiers into a 10-man to combat squad them and give it 4 Incinerators and combat squad it, so one group gets 4 Incinerators, so you could drop down, cast Flame, and then blast the squad with 4d6, Strength 6, AP 1, 1 damage flamers. Also, dropping a Purifier Squad for the upgrade Foretelling of Locust would also be good, so then you can get that redeploy with Foretelling of Locust. In that case, I would drop both Purifiers, take Foretelling of Locust, and then put in a Purgation Squad with 4 side cannons instead, and then maybe you can fit in something like an Inquisitor. You can also take a Warding Stave on your units for the option to use Warding Zone to give a unit a 5-up invuln when you want them to be just a little bit more tankier. Next, Next, we've got a list running sword bearers and rapiers with dreadnoughts and tech marines, both as patrol detachments. We have a brother captain running foretelling of locust for the redeploy to give off an aura of reroll wound rolls of 1. Also forgot to give him the sword bearer's warlord trait for this list to cast a 4-up invuln on a vehicle for our dreadnoughts. And we're also running a Grandmaster with the same thing as usual. Strike Squad and 2 Dreadnoughts with multi-meltas, as well as 2 Nemesis Dread Knights with side cannons and silencers, 1 with teleporter and 1 with outrunning. This is a gun platform list that relies on your shooting with Nemesis Dread Knights, with your Dreadnoughts being pseudo tanks with their 4-up invulns, -1 damage, and armored resilience for a 1+ save. Rapiers, we've got a Tech Marine and Drago, whose abilities don't care if you're in the same Brotherhood or not. Tech Marine has the upgrade to heal a vehicle for flat 3 wounds, and then we have a Strike Squad, some Servitors, and 2 10-mans of Interceptors to Combat Squad. Next, we've got a Grey Knight's Pally Bomb in a single Rapiers detachment running a Chaplain, Grandmaster and Nemesis, Drago, 4 Strikes, an Apothecary, 10 Paladins with side cannons, and 15 Interceptors. Apothecary has foretelling of locust, but you can put it on the Chaplain, and the Apothecary has inescapable wrath, but it should be unyielding anvil to make your Paladins all have OBSEC. And finally, we have the most standard Grey Knights list with extra points for you to put into, but this is basically the skeleton of Grey Knights that you can build around. You can add in a Libby, maybe an Inquisitor for the Xenos trait to CP farm instead of using Divination, or you can add in some Purgations or Purifier squads. All right, so let's get into some hobbying tips. These are some things that you need to look out for when you're hobbying with your Grey Knights. Strike Squad box only comes with about 8 halberds, but you can easily use green stuff to make easy halberd spears when you clip off staffs from demon hammers or warding staves. You can also get away with just adding in your warding staves. You get 2 warding staves anyways, so if you want to run warding staves, you actually don't need to get more halberds. But if you do want all of them to have halberds and no warding staves, then you're going to have to use some green stuff to make some halberds later on. A lot of halberds are double-handed. This is a double-handed weapon, so if you built something like Sanguinary Guard, 2-handed weapons can be a pain in the ass to put together. So use super glue and a quick set instead of plastic glue so you don't mess up the mold by melting the plastic in case you mess up. Plastic glue, especially like Citadel plastic glue, that stuff, it melts the actual plastic with each other to give it a stronger hold. And if you mess up putting a double-handed halberd onto your model and you need to clip it off, it's going to be a lot harder when you're using plastic glue. So instead, just use some super glue and get a quick set and use that instead of using your plastic glue. It will be a lot easier for you. You won't gunk up your model and mess up a lot of stuff. Yeah. Super glue, quick set. You can get super glue and quick set online. I actually prefer this one. This one's my favorite one. I use this a lot. And then I also use like this dropper bottle with a needle as well. And I put all my quick set in there. So then it's not like a spray or anything. And I just drop it onto the model. It actually makes building models a lot easier and a lot faster. This one is pretty nice if you have a lot of Primaris Marine models laying around that are not being used. They can be easily converted into Grey Knight models by snipping off the shoulder pads and replacing them with Grey Knight pads. You can also cut off half of the model from the front and replace it with a Grey Knight chest piece, and then from there just green stuff the rest of it. So then that way you can save some money by doing that and doing a little bit of some kit bashing in order to make a strike or an interceptor. Paladin boxes only come with 5 Paladin back pieces. Why? Well, it's a Terminator set, but still. If you want to have your Paladins, you're only going to get 5 Paladin back pieces, but you can use random bits like from warding staves as a back piece instead. And if you're using your Strike Squad box, you could probably find a couple of things that you could put onto the backs of their jetpacks. Also, if you need more halberds, you can buy equivalents from places like Pop Goes the Monkey. They have some great halberd equivalents that don't look like halberds, but they look just as cool as halberds. You got like some spears that you can run. There's one that has like a gun attached to it as well. So if you want to have more halberds, that's a great way, is just to use Pop Goes the Monkey to buy some extra ones. The most bang for your buck is to actually split the Hexfire box with a friend. The Hexfire box is pretty decent. Since it comes with Castle and Crow, it comes with a Nemesis Dread Knight, and it also comes with 10 strike squads. So that's a great way to get started with Grey Knights. It's a great box for Grey Knights. And then if you split it with a friend that wants to start up Thousand Sons, you can do that. So then you're only spending about $87 or something like that on your Hexfire box, which is a huge steal for the stuff that you're getting with your Grey Knights, because they're all stuff that you can use besides Castle and Crow. And now on to our painting, on how to paint the Grey Knights. Now they are Space Marines, so they're extremely easy to paint. You're going to want to paint either with a base coat of Grey Knight Steel, or you're going to prime them with Lead Belcher or some type of metallic gray and apply some washes onto them. If you want to zenithal highlight on metals, prime black and then zenithal with a lighter metallic before putting on your base coat of a darker metallic. This will make your darker metallic have a little bit of a lighter tint when it comes to the top part, because you're zenithal highlighting. You don't ever want to put a metallic on top of white, because it's going to wash it out and then it looks kind of nasty. That's why Turbo Dork, when they use their turbo shifts, they recommend that you put it on a black base instead. So it's going to be the same thing, but because you're using a metallic color, since you're using a metallic color as a base coat, or for your zenithal highlight, and then you're putting another metallic on top of it, it doesn't wash it out. So that's a great way to use that. If you're going to use a metallic base coat as well and are using an airbrush, use the airbrush and spray it from the bottom to get a nice shift in color, and then it kind of gives you like a Turbo Dork kind of color shift. And then if you want the sides of your armor to be darker, especially if you're doing grays, you can use Monument's transparent black, or you can thin down your own black to create a nice vignette on your armor pieces. And there you go. That is everything that you need to start playing Grey Knights. There's a lot of information in here. So, go back and watch it if you need more help. You can always join the Dice Check Discord, and you can talk about Grey Knights in there. I'm usually on there helping out people as much as I can. And yeah, but that is it for today. If you guys like this type of content, if you guys like this type of video, please leave a comment below letting me know that you like it, so I know if I should keep making these types of starting guides for people or not. And leave a like, so that I can know if you guys like it or not, obviously. That's it for this episode. We'll see you guys in the next one. I think in the next one, maybe we'll talk about like some Thousand Sons or something and how to start up that Thousand Sons army. And yeah, we'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye-bye.